Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of the Burgh Breakdown. I'm your host, Nick Belsky, and it's a really exciting time for Pittsburgh sports. The Pirates have returned from the All-Star break, and they're playing some pretty good baseball. The Steelers will open up their training camp 1 week from today, actually. And I understand we're still 2 months out from Penguins training camp in Cranberry, but hey, we're over halfway through the 2026 offseason, so it's not nothing on the side of the Pittsburgh Penguins. But we're going to kick things off with those stinking Pirates because they continue to play some pretty good baseball. And not only are they in season, but as of right now, they are in a playoff spot. They're currently tied with the Miami Marlins and the St. Louis Cardinals for Wild Card 3, in large part due to a series win in Cleveland that could have easily, and some people would say, should have easily been a series sweep if not for the Pirates bullpen. And that is going to be the bulk of what we talk about, especially because, you know, if you distill it down to that game alone, if you're able to walk away with a win on Saturday night in Cleveland, we'd be sitting here in sole possession of Wild Card 3, not just tied with 2 other teams. But I digress to that point for now. Before we get into that, wanted to briefly touch on what we saw last night in the Pirates opener against the Yankees. 8-5 loss in game 1 is a tough pill to swallow. There was a lot of people that were amped up for this series because the Pirates had been and still have been playing some pretty good baseball. And the hope was you go into Yankee Stadium and you kind of make a statement on one of the biggest stages that the game has to offer. But it was a tough night for Braxton Ashcraft, something we have not been able to say really at all this season. He has been arguably the best, but certainly the most consistent starting pitcher that the Pirates have had all season long, and yet he just gets blown up. 8 runs allowed in 3 innings pitched. His worst start of the season by far, and I'm not trying to make excuses for Braxton Ashcraft. He knows he needs to be better, and I think everybody expects him to be better. But he came into this start on 9 days rest. That is not just off schedule. That is far off schedule for a starting pitcher in baseball. That's always going to be a tough night. Now, it's not always going to be 8 runs allowed, multiple home runs allowed tough night. But starting pitchers are creatures of habit. And if you watch the game with Braxton Ashcraft against the Phillies, you can tell that he is definitely a creature of habit because they were calling time so many times, getting him off schedule. He was getting very animated and agitated in that game. So that tells you that this is a guy that likes his routines. Pitching off 9 days rest is very far off the routine. So I understand a lot of people are upset. A lot of people are feeling a little bit let down by Braxton Ashcraft, but I'm intrigued to see how he looks with an actual off-day routine and an actual turn here going into his next start, which I believe will be on Sunday against the Chicago Cubs. Another big moment, another big matchup for Braxton Ashcraft. But there is positives to take from that game as well. I mean, the Pirates go down 4-0 in the first, and by the middle of the third, you're up 5-4. So the offense continues to show you that no matter how far behind you get early, it should still be within reach for this Pirates team. There's still a chance that this offense comes back because it is just that elite, led currently by Esmeralyn Valdez, who just continues his torrid pace. But nonetheless, as we stand today, Pirates tied for third in the wild card rankings. But they would be in first if not for the bullpen, and that's where everybody's focus is going into the trade deadline in just about 2 weeks. Since June 1st, the Pirates bullpen has just under a 5 ERA and are 24th in all of baseball in that category. They are tied for 24th in walks. They are tied for 17th in home runs, and they are 25th in whip. So they are firmly a bottom 10 bullpen in the entire league. Now, a lot of people are saying that it's the worst bullpen in baseball. I think that's hyperbolic because we've seen them have their moments over the season. And it's not just, oh, this one game they stepped up. Okay. They've had series, they've had weeks, specifically early in the season, they were fine. But as the year has gone on, those moments have been fewer and further in between. We did see one of those in the final series prior to the All-Star break. That series against the Brewers, the Pirates bullpen was very good. Just 4 earned runs allowed in 12 innings pitched during that series, and 3 of those 4 runs were allowed in garbage time of a 14-5 victory in the final game before the All-Star break. But I think as we sit here today, everyone would agree they have just allowed too many blown saves. They have just blown too many games in the 8th or the 9th inning for the Pirates to feel confident in that going into a push for the playoffs. And it all kind of dates back to last trade deadline when they traded away their closer, David Bednar. That trade of Bednar to the Yankees, coincidentally, is really coming back to bite the Pirates. We're almost a year removed from it. You trade him away, and he was having a resurgent season because he had a down year in 2024. He started off struggling in 2025, but you sent him down to AAA, told him to get right. He came back up, and he did just that. He had a 2.37 ERA at the time that you traded him, and you acquired some far-off prospects and Rafael Flores, who is your third catcher at the moment, behind Henry Davis and behind Endy Rodriguez when he's healthy. But even worse than that is that the biggest issue in the pen is the closer role specifically. Gregory Soto has struggled over the last couple of months. Dennis Santana, despite having a clean inning on Monday night, is in danger of being DFA'd. That's the type of struggles he's had. Mason Montgomery, can we find an identity for him in the bullpen, please? And that could go for really the entire Pirates bullpen, but specifically for Mason Montgomery, he's been very good for most of the season, but he's been used absolutely everywhere. He has pitched in every inning except the 2nd and 3rd this year. He's pitched in the 1st, and then from the 4th onward, he has pitched in every single inning. What is this guy's role? We don't know on the outside, and I don't think he knows. And I honestly don't think the Pirates have established roles for anybody in the bullpen. And that's when you find yourself in some danger. Now, of course, the trade deadline is a couple weeks away. There's conversations happening of whether or not the Pirates will pull the trigger. I think that is pretty much a given that they are going to add a bullpen arm. The question just is who and at what caliber. Mason Miller's name is being thrown around a lot. I think that fixes a lot. I think that steadies a lot of your bullpen because I think even bringing in one player, one guy to be your definitive closer, whether that's Mason Miller, whether that's Aroldis Chapman, who I think is probably off the table considering how good the Red Sox have been over the past couple of weeks, whether that be Weaver from the Mets, you need somebody to come in here and solidify that 9th inning role because it has been pretty much a revolving door all season long where you haven't been able to find that guy that can shut things down in the 9th inning, get those final 3 outs. But if you can bring that in, if you get a steady closer, just one, it helps this bullpen so much. Multiple relief pitchers obviously would be better. You are able to kind of bolster the bullpen even more. But even if they bring in just one guy, but he has to be the right guy to be that 9th inning guy, look at how it slots everybody else in. Gregory Soto goes back to being an 8th inning guy, being a setup guy who should only pitch 1 inning. 1 inning total. That's what you need Soto to be. I think we've noticed that anytime Soto self-destructs, it's when he has to come in and clean up the inning before and then come back out for his inning in whether that be the 8th or the 9th inning. That's when he gets into trouble. Multiple ups, that's when he gets into trouble. So you allow Soto to be that one inning setup man. Give Mason Montgomery that pseudo role if you want to, where he is one of your 7th inning options, or if you want to go with an opener at some point in the tail end of this season, that's Mason Montgomery. But it's just 7th or opener. Those are his roles. You have Evan Sisk when he comes back. He can be your Swiss Army knife. He's, as Michael McHenry calls him, everyday Evan, but he can also be a 7th inning guy. You have Isaac Mattson, who can be your firefighter, come in with runners on base and be able to blow people away and get those final outs of an inning. You then have 3 guys who can be in your middle relief, one of them that could probably do high leverage if needed, but in the best of circumstances is middle relief, and that's Yohan Ramirez. Wilbur Dotel is somebody who I have faith in now that he's healthy to be able to be a consistent middle relief guy. And then, of course, you have Carmen Mlodzinski, who is your mid relief and maybe even a piece for your rotation if Mitch Keller continues to falter. I don't hate that bullpen. And all you have to do is add one piece. Again, it has to be the right piece. If it's Mason Miller, I think it changes a lot for this bullpen. But slotting these players into positions, into roles that they know day in and day out, this is where I'm at, I think changes a lot for the Pittsburgh Pirates and this stretch run as they try to make the playoffs. So we have less than 2 weeks now till the MLB trade deadline. We'll have to wait and see what Ben Cherington does to address this, and hopefully it does just enough to get this bullpen to catch up almost to where the starting rotation is, and specifically try to catch them up to where the offense is, because they have one of the best offenses in baseball, and you definitely don't want to waste that. Let's move over to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Training camp less than a week away at this point. If you look at training camp, there are a couple storylines, but I want to talk about, in my opinion, the biggest player to watch at Steelers camp this year. Last season, and pretty much every season for the past, half decade, the Steelers defense has had extremely high expectations, and for good reason. There's a lot of talent on that side of the ball. There's also a lot of money spent on that side of the ball. But if you look back to last season specifically, the reality is they had a pretty good run defense, right? 13th in the NFL, but the passing defense was one of the worst, and at times the absolute worst in the National Football League. They finished 29th in the NFL. And then you look at the playoffs and you say, well, for the first time in a long time, the defense wasn't the problem. They actually stood tall and held down the Texans' offense, created multiple turnovers, but the reinforcements on the offensive side of the ball just never came. But the one area that we all kind of agree needs to be much better is avoiding the big play on the defensive side of the ball. The key to that in 2026, in my opinion at least, is the return of Deshaun Elliott. Deshaun Elliott missed 12 games last year. He only played in 5 of them. And in those 5 games, the Steelers had a record of 3-2, and I understand that doesn't really blow you away. But even the Packers loss, which was the last game in which he played, the Steelers were winning whenever Deshaun Elliott left the game. They were up 16-7 at the time Deshaun Elliott left the game. And then they went on to lose, I think, 32 or 33-16. They gave up like 20-some odd consecutive points in the second half and got blown away by the Green Bay Packers. But they were winning in that game when Deshaun Elliott came out. So that could have been 4-1 in games that he played, and I understand that doesn't do much for you whenever it's a 17-game season. But I think you look at this player and you have to realize how important he is to the back end. Yeah, the front is what it is, and I think the defensive front is going to be extremely good again. They were 13th in the NFL last year, and that was with Derek Harmon, 1, being a rookie, and 2, being injured on and off through the early portion of the season. If he is back and healthy this year in year number 2, he is going to be that much better. That's also with Y.A. Black playing a substantial role as a rookie. I think he is going to be improved this year. I think moving Keanu Benton into a more natural position off the nose tackle is going to make him better this year. I think the usage of Nick Herbig a little bit more is going to help them this year. So I think that defensive front is pretty solid, right? You don't have a lot of questions about the Steelers' defensive front, but you look to the back end, and that is kind of the area that the Steelers need to improve the most to be able to make a jump from a decent defense to being one of the best defenses in the league, which is what is expected of them, considering, again, the money spent on them, and 2, the talent and the names that are there. So I think it comes down to Deshaun Elliott on the back end. Yeah, you have Joey Porter Jr., who is one of the best shutdown corners in the league. He was that last year, and yet this defense still was unable to defend the pass. They add Jamel Dean on the other side, and I think that's a really good complementary piece. They add Jaquan Brisker on the back end, and I think that is a very big addition. But I don't think anything raises the bar for them more than having Deshaun Elliott healthy. His physicality, his ability to cover not just on the back end, but specifically cover tight ends, the confidence and swagger that he brings. I think it was missing from that secondary last year. Yeah, Jalen Ramsey brings some of that, but he brought it in a position that he really never played at the NFL level. And it's not like he's a couple years out of college and he played it in college, so, we're just reverting back to what he did 2 or 3 years ago. No, he's been in the league for a long time and never played that role. And you had to put him in that role last year because you really didn't have any other options. Now, of course, injuries can occur again, but I think you specifically need Deshaun Elliott to remain healthy this season if you want that secondary to play to the level that really you're hoping the secondary would, considering the names that are on it. Because it doesn't just set the tone for the secondary. It allows everybody to kind of be in their spot and play their role to a higher level. Specifically, Jalen Ramsey. It allows him to be put in, I hate calling it the rover role, but it allows him to be moved around a lot more. And Jalen Ramsey is, at his best, just somebody who creates chaos. We saw it early last season when Deshaun Elliott was healthy. We saw it in that New York Jets game. He was able to come up and make that hit on Garrett Wilson to win the game. He was able to do it in the Week 2 matchup against the Seattle Seahawks despite the Elliott injury. And he was able to come up and make a huge interception early in that game. It helps that you added Jaquan Brisker, but I think getting Jalen Ramsey into the role that he was expected to play when the Steelers acquired him last offseason, I think that goes a long way. So while I'm keeping my eyes on a lot of different pieces, we talked on the last episode about Caleb Johnson and Roman Wilson. On the defensive side of the ball, there are a few people I'm watching more than Deshaun Elliott to see how his return to play is able to go in this instance, because they really, really need him to have a good season. And I think if he's healthy, he will. Let's close things out with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and specifically about one of their younger players in Rutger McGroarty. I think it's fair to say that Rutger's time with the Penguins organization hasn't quite gone to plan. When that trade went down a couple off seasons ago and the Penguins traded away the then number 1 and surefire top prospect in Braden Yeager, the narrative around the deal was, well, they brought over Rutger McGroarty because he was closer to being ready for the NHL. And that still might be the case because it doesn't seem like Braden Yeager is quite ready to make that jump. But I think once you're 3 years beyond the trade, once you're entering the 3rd season of Rutger McGroarty, that you've kind of lost that aspect of the deal. we all kind of recognized the second he stepped on the ice that the skating just wasn't ready to play at the highest level. He made the team out of camp and got the opportunity to play in the first handful of games, but everybody realized that it wasn't clicking. It did not look like he was quite ready. So he gets sent down to the AHL. He builds up throughout that season. He gets an opportunity late in that season because the Penguins were far out of a playoff spot at that point, and he looks much better. Unfortunately, during that cup of coffee at the NHL level late in the season, he gets injured. He suffers a lower body injury, and it costs him the Calder Cup playoffs, something that Kyle Dubas has stated time and time again is an important time of year for them to evaluate these young players, and is an important time of year for these young players to grow, to gain experience, and to develop in a high-stakes environment. Rutger McGroarty lost that after his first year in the Penguins organization. And then he comes back for year two, and he has more of the same. Injuries and more competition in the Penguins roster because they went from a team that was far out of the playoffs, finishing in the bottom 10 in the NHL, a lottery team, to a playoff team in an instant. And a big reason was because they brought in and hit on a lot of, for lack of a better term, dart throws last offseason. But it didn't help for Rutger McGroarty that he missed all of training camp due to an upper body injury, so he already lost out on his spot because he wasn't healthy. And then he comes back, plays a little bit at the NHL level, looks like he's playing at a higher level than he did in year one, but he gets injured again in practice when he suffers a concussion. At that point of the season, the replacements were too good to remove from the lineup, and he gets sent back down to the American Hockey League, where he spent the remainder of the season. Then comes the Calder Cup run. 4 goals, 9 points in 15 games. He wasn't the Penguins' leader in points during the Calder Cup run. He wasn't their leader in goals because it was more of a collective effort offensively for the baby Penguins. But he had a very, very impressive postseason where, of anyone, Rutger McGroarty stepped up in the biggest and brightest moments. He had probably the most memorable moments of that entire postseason run. An OT winner against the Hershey Bears that was huge in that series, and then an even bigger goal in Game 4 of the conference finals against Toronto to tie the series at 2. Remember, Wilkes-Barre went down 2-0 after losing both games at home. He was able to score with about 3 minutes left to get Wilkes-Barre even in that series before they eventually fell in 6 games. But he showed that ability to score when the lights are brightest. He showed a much improved skating ability, and he showed that really he is ready to jump to that next level, in my opinion. Now, again, while I am bullish on Rutger McGroarty, the Penguins are not just going to hand it to him going into next season. They're going to have to make him earn it, because you look at the roster right now, and this is a conversation that we have constantly at this point because, well, it's kind of ridiculous how many NHL caliber forwards that the Penguins have. The entire top 6 from last year is back as of this moment. They brought in some new faces that you'd have to imagine are going to be in the plans to make the opening night roster in Andrei Kuzmenko and Nicholas Robertson. Then you have 2 players that were on the playoff roster last year and played in that series against the Flyers in Elmer Soderblom, Justin Brazeau, Connor Dewar. Not only that, he's contending with fellow kids in Avery Hayes and Tristan Brose and Bill Zonin and so on and so on. Then you add on the fact that Philip Hollander is still around. There's a lot of players gunning for NHL roster spots. But I'm confident in Rutger McGroarty. And I've said this in seasons past, and I was confident in Rutger McGroarty going into last year. And then you learn that he's injured. And that, to me, is one of the biggest things that hampered him in year 2 from breaking out and becoming an everyday NHLer, is that he couldn't stay healthy. And when he was out of the lineup, the people that replaced him played too well to be removed. I'm confident that this is going to be the year that Rutger McGroarty breaks through. If he can stay healthy, of course. That is the caveat. You have to stay healthy to be able to stay consistently at the NHL level, because it feels like the Penguins have so many options that if you go down with injury, the same thing that happened last year is going to happen this year. The person that takes your place is probably going to play pretty good, and it's going to make it harder for Kyle Dubas and Dan Muse and Nick Bonino to insert you into the lineup while taking out somebody that's been as good as they have been. But when I look at McGroarty, I see so many improvements on the skating. I think that is the biggest factor. That was the biggest reason in year one that it felt like he wasn't quite ready, is the skating. He has done so much work at that particular area of the game that, to me, it's always going to be a factor. But as of right now, I'm not concerned about that holding him back from making the team and sticking at the NHL level. If anything, I'd be concerned about where his ceiling is at because of it, but not that he isn't an NHLer. I think that ship has sailed, considering the way he's played and the way he's improved in that area. His ability to play all special teams, I think, is going to help him in a big way. I mean, Elmer Soderblom didn't kill penalties. Justin Brazeau, if I'm not mistaken, didn't really kill penalties. So McGroarty having that tool in his belt is going to help him get opportunities here this season. And I think we need to identify what breaking out looks like for Rutger McGroarty. Yeah, it'd be great if he broke out the way Anthony Mantha did last year. It'd be great if he broke out the way that Igor Chinikov did last year, but I don't think that's the expectation that we should be having of Rutger McGroarty. I think breaking out for Rutger McGroarty in 2026 is making the team out of camp. He's done it before. He can do it again. Becoming a fixture in the Penguins' middle six. So whether that be the third line with Ben Kindle or finding a way up to the second line some way, somehow. I don't know what that would look like. Maybe somebody gets injured. Maybe somebody falters early in the season and they want to put Malkin back at center and add a winger to that line. However it looks, Rutger McGroarty becomes a fixture night in and night out in the middle six. And I think if you're looking for counting stats, what I would consider a breakout for Rutger McGroarty is 15 plus goals and 40 plus points. If we see that from Rutger McGroarty, I think it will have been a very successful season. I would think it would be considered, in my opinion, a breakout season for Rutger McGroarty. And I think that's possible. I think that we could be sitting here a year from now, and he could be a guy that you don't write in with pencil in the Penguins' projected lineup for 2027-28. I think he's a guy that you would write in pen as a member of that lineup going into that season. So I'm bullish on Rutger McGroarty. I have been for some time, but going into this season, I think he has a lot more of the boxes checked than he has in any other year prior. All he needs to do is stay healthy and do what he's been doing and continue the trajectory that he has had when he's been on the ice. If he can do that, I think we're going to be seeing a breakout season from Rutger McGroarty. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Burgh Breakdown. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. Remember, you can find us on YouTube at Nick Belsky with new episodes and clips of Burgh Breakdown coming out every single day, or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcast from by simply searching Burgh Breakdown. But that's it for this one. We'll see you guys next time.